I first heard my name come from the well when I was 7 years old. It was just a whisper, soft and distant, like someone calling to me from deep underground. I remember standing at the edge, peering into the darkness below, my heart pounding. Ethan. The voice had no echo. It wasn't my mother's voice, nor my father's. It wasn't any voice I recognized at all. Just my name, spoken softly, spoken clearly, spoken from somewhere deep below. I should have run. I should have told someone. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring into that endless black hole, my small hands gripping the cold stone rim, waiting, hoping I'd hear it again. But the well stayed silent. For a while, hashtag, 20 years later the house was mine now. After my father's passing, there was no one else to take it. My mother had died when I was young, and I had no siblings. The old farmhouse sat on 5 acres of overgrown land, isolated from town, surrounded by endless fields and a dense line of trees. And in the backyard, standing as it always had, was the well. I had forgotten about it, or maybe I had forced myself to. But when I moved in, when I stood at the kitchen window on that first night, staring out at the moonlit yard, my eyes found it immediately. That old, crumbling stone circle, that bottomless hole. I felt something deep inside me tighten. A memory, a warning clawing its way to the surface. Then a sound, soft, faint, coming from outside, coming from the well. I didn't move at first. I told myself it was the wind, the way it whistled through the cracks in the old wood. But then I heard it again, clear, sharp, insistent. Ethan, my name, spoken exactly as it had been when I was a child. I don't remember grabbing the flashlight. I don't remember stepping outside. But suddenly I was there, standing at the edge of the well, just like before. The light from my flashlight barely pierced the darkness below. It felt deeper than it should have been, like the bottom had been swallowed by something. Then a whisper. Help me. A voice. Not my name this time. Not just a single word. A plea. I felt the air shift around me, cold and damp, like something rising from below. I shined my light deeper, straining to see. The stone walls were slick with moisture, old and worn. But then, just for a moment, I thought I saw something move down there. A shadow, a shape, something alive. The whisper came again, clearer this time, louder. Help me, Ethan. I staggered back, my breath caught in my throat. Because this time, the voice sounded exactly like mine. The ground beneath my feet felt too soft, too unstable as I stumbled away from the well. I couldn't tear my eyes from the stone structure, its dark mouth gaping like some insatiable creature waiting for its next victim. But there was no escaping the voice now, no dismissing the feeling that something was down there. The air grew heavy, pressing against my chest with every breath. My heart raced, the thudding in my ears drowned by the constant, low hum of the wind through the trees. But beneath it, I could still hear that voice. My voice. Help me, Ethan. The words echoed through my mind, crashing through me like waves of ice-cold water. I had to get away. I knew I should leave, but something held me there, as if the ground had rooted me to the spot. My legs felt weak, my feet sluggish. Help me. I could almost feel the words vibrating in my bones, calling to me, urging me to return. What was this? What was it? I forced myself to move, to take a few steps back toward the house, but my body refused to cooperate. I turned, looking at the path that led back to the safety of the warm lights of the farmhouse. But the well kept pulling me in, as if its very presence was suffocating the air around me. I stumbled forward once more, as if my legs had a mind of their own, and my feet carried me back to the edge of the well without my permission. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, just staring into the abyss. Please, don't go near it. The warning in my head had come too late. The pull was too strong. I leaned over the edge, clutching the cold stone. The darkness below seemed endless, as if it reached into places I couldn't even begin to comprehend. And then, through that deep blackness, through that impenetrable shadow, a shape flickered just at the edge of my vision. It was brief, almost too fast to see, but unmistakable. A face, not mine, but someone else's. A woman's face, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes staring back at me from the depths of the well. Her mouth twisted into something that could only be described as a smile, wide and twisted. The sight made my stomach lurch. I took a step back, tripping over a rock behind me. My feet hit the ground hard, and I gasped for air, my chest tightening. I was breathing too quickly, trying to shake the image of that face from my mind, but it lingered. Her empty, hollow eyes haunted me as the whisper came again, this time louder and more urgent. Ethan. I crawled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. Every instinct told me to run, to get away, to never come back. But the well seemed to call to me as though it had a claim on me, an undeniable force that demanded I listen. Help me. It wasn't a plea anymore. It was a command. I couldn't move. My body wouldn't obey me. I was frozen, unable to tear myself away. The well had taken root in my mind, and there was no escape. I finally forced myself to look away, but even then, the voice didn't stop. Ethan. I scrambled to my feet, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the flashlight. My mind screamed at me to leave, to shut the door and never look back. But something inside me, some instinct that had been buried long ago, urged me to listen. I took a step closer, my breath catching in my throat as I bent over the stone edge once more. The face was gone, swallowed by the darkness, but the voice lingered, curling around my thoughts like a snake. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My mind told me to stop, but my body ignored it, reaching out as if to pull the source of the voice from the well. That's when I saw it. A flicker of light, just a glimmer deep, deep within the well. My pulse quickened as I stared at it. The light flickered again, brightening for a brief moment before fading away. It was beneath the surface. There was something down there, and whatever it was drawing me in. I had to see it. I had to know what was calling me. I reached down. The ground shifted beneath me, and I lost my balance. I grabbed for the stone, but my fingers slipped, and before I knew it, I was falling. I woke up with a sharp gasp. I wasn't in the well. I wasn't even outside anymore. I was back in my room in the farmhouse, lying on the cold hardwood floor. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, some twisted nightmare my mind had conjured up to punish me for living here. But the smell of damp earth filled my nose, and my eyes snapped open. My body was covered in dirt, and my hand was shaking. I turned my head and looked at the window, at the full moon shining down through the cracks in the curtains. But there, in the reflection of the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure standing behind me. I whipped around, my heart slamming in my chest. There was no one there, but the air felt heavier, colder, as if something had entered the room with me, lingering just out of sight. Ethan. The voice was softer now, but no less insistent. I stood up quickly, the dizziness still swirling in my head. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I grabbed the flashlight from a nightstand and stumbled out into the hallway. The voice came again, this time from downstairs. Ethan. The sound was louder, more defined, more urgent. I moved toward it despite every rational part of my mind telling me to turn back, to leave, to never go near the well again. But I had to know. I had to understand. The door to the basement was open, the stairs leading down into a cold, damp space below. I stepped inside, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The voice was getting louder. Ethan, help me. It was there in the basement. I had no choice. I walked down the steps, and for the first time, I realized that the well had never been calling my name. It had been calling for someone else. The sound of my footsteps on the basement stairs echoed in the stillness of the house, each step feeling like an eternity. I could hear the whispers clearer now, though they seemed to surround me, not coming from a single direction. The voice, my name, calling from the dark, urging me down into the unknown. Ethan, help me. I paused halfway down, the air around me growing colder, the temperature dropping as I descended. I could feel the temperature shift, the warmth of the house slipping away, leaving only the cold. My breath came in shallow bursts, visible in the air, even though I knew the furnace was still running. There was something wrong with the atmosphere down here. It wasn't just the physical cold. It felt unnatural. I gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam cutting through the darkness but offering no comfort. The shadows stretched unnaturally, slithering across the walls like sentient beings, waiting for something or someone. My pulse quickened as the whispers grew louder, now accompanied by a faint scratching sound, as if something or someone was clawing against the walls just beyond my reach. The basement door at the bottom of the stairs loomed ahead, cracked open just enough for me to see a sliver of darkness beyond. I hesitated, unsure of what I might find. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, but my legs moved forward without my permission, as if they were bound to the pull of the voice calling my name. I stepped through the door. The room was as I remembered it from childhood, a dim, musty space with boxes piled high and old furniture covered in dusty sheets. But there, in the far corner of the room, where the shadows seemed to swallow everything in their path, was the well. It looked smaller than I remembered, yet its presence felt even more oppressive. The stone walls of the well seemed to pulse with an eerie, unholy life, vibrating with an energy that filled the room. The wooden cover that once sealed it was gone, leaving only the dark hole that stared back at me like an open mouth, waiting to devour anything that came too close. And that voice, my name, came again, louder now, as if it were rising from the depths, coming up through the well's very walls. Ethan, come closer. I couldn't resist. My feet took me toward the well, my body drawn to it as if it had a claim on me. The air grew colder with each step, the whispers growing clearer, louder, until they were almost deafening. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, and I knew that this was not just a dream. It wasn't a nightmare or some childish fear from the past. This was real. I stood at the edge, peering into the darkness below. I should have felt terror, overwhelming fear, but instead, there was only a strange compulsion. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the blackness. The deeper I looked, the more I could feel the presence moving within it, the sense of something alive, something aware of me. Suddenly, the well began to tremble beneath my feet. The ground shook, and I stumbled, nearly falling into the opening. The air was thick with the sound of whispers now, hundreds of voices, each one speaking at once, but all calling my name. Ethan, help me. Come closer. I felt something grab me, then a cold, clammy hand clasping around my ankle. My heart stopped as I tried to pull my leg back, but the grip was tight, unyielding. I looked down in a panic, but there was nothing there. Nothing. But the sensation didn't fade. Instead, the hand, or whatever it was, began to pull, dragging me toward the well's edge. I tried to scream, but my voice wouldn't work, my throat constricting with fear. I clawed at the stone walls, my nails scraping uselessly against the rough surface, but I couldn't stop myself from inching closer to the gaping hole. Something cold and heavy was pulling me in. Ethan, the voice seemed to come from all directions now, wrapping around me like tendrils, tightening with every breath. The well trembled again, louder this time, the ground shaking beneath me as if the earth itself was alive, angry, and impatient. The darkness below seemed to reach out toward me, as if the well were a living thing, wanting to swallow me whole. And then I saw it, a shape in the dark, a figure, pale and distorted, rising from the well. It was a woman, her skin stretched thin and gray, her eyes wide and unblinking. Her mouth moved as if it was speaking, but no words came out. Only that horrible whisper, repeating my name over and over again. I recoiled, my mind racing with terror, but the hand that had grabbed my ankle, it tightened. I screamed, and this time, my voice broke through the wall of sound. But it didn't matter. I wasn't alone. The well was alive with something far worse than I could have ever imagined. Ethan, it's too late now. You're mine. I gasped, the cold air choking me. The woman's face twisted into something grotesque as she leaned closer, her eyes boring into mine with an intensity that felt wrong, like she knew everything about me. She knew my deepest fears. I tried to back away, my legs shaking, but I could hardly move. It was as if the earth itself was holding me in place, pressing me down into the cold, hard floor of the basement. You can't escape. Her voice was everywhere. Inside my head, inside my bones. It echoed in my chest, reverberating through every inch of me, as if she had crawled into my very soul. The whisper grew louder, rising in volume until it was deafening. I could no longer tell what was real and what was just the voice, just the sound of my name, looping over and over again. Suddenly, something sharp grazed my hand. I glanced down. The stone rim of the well had shifted, and the surface was now jagged, cracked, and splitting open like a wound in the earth. And from that wound, from the deep blackness inside the well, I could feel the cold intensifying, crawling up my skin. I tried to pull away, but the dark presence seemed to reach out for me, as if trying to drag me back into the abyss. I was being pulled toward it, pulled into the darkness. But then something stopped me, a flash of light. The well trembled, and for just a moment, the air cleared, the whispers faltered. The woman's figure recoiled into the shadows, vanishing. The coldness seemed to dissipate for a split second. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The light flickered, barely illuminating the dark corners of the basement. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat like a war drum calling me into the unknown. The presence that had been so suffocating only moments ago seemed to withdraw for a brief second, but I knew it wasn't gone. I could still feel the weight of its cold fingers on my skin, the whispers seeping into my mind like a slow, steady poison. I turned slowly, looking around the room, hoping, praying that the basement was still as familiar as it had been when I was a child. But the walls no longer looked the same. The boxes, once so carefully stacked, now lay scattered in disarray, their contents spilling out onto the floor as though something had clawed at them from within. The dusty sheets that had once covered the old furniture had been ripped away, torn and fluttering as though something had been struggling beneath them. The atmosphere felt wrong, too wrong for a place that had been my childhood sanctuary. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the time I had spent away. I couldn't help but wonder if the well itself had changed, become something new, something alive. That's when I saw it again. The shadow. It was not human, nor was it a shape I could describe in any familiar terms. It moved in the corner of my eye, an impossible angle, as though it was crouching low to the ground. I turned quickly, only to be met with empty space. The whispering voice returned, quieter now, as if it was lurking just beneath the surface of the room. "Ethan." I froze. The voice was no longer a mere whisper. It was almost a command, pulling at my very soul, urging me forward. "Come closer." There was no doubt in my mind now. Whatever had been waiting in the well had awakened. The presence was no longer just a voice. It was something that knew me, something that was familiar yet alien in its essence. I could hear the scratching again, louder this time, coming from within the well. My eyes darted back toward the hole, and I saw a figure rise from the depths. It wasn't the woman from before. This figure was different, more intangible, as if it were part of the very air, woven into the fabric of the basement itself. Its outline was fuzzy, indistinct, shifting like smoke in the dark. But its eyes were the only thing I could see clearly. Dark, inhuman, with a coldness that made my stomach drop. I tried to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. My body refused to obey. I could feel the cold creeping over me, crawling up from the very floor, pushing through my skin like ice. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, the adrenaline crashing through me in waves, but still, I couldn't tear myself away. The air seemed to grow heavier, suffocating me as I stood there, staring into the abyss of the well. "Ethan, it's not too late." The voice was calm now, almost gentle, as if trying to lull me into submission. It sounded like a promise, like it had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for me. I was the one it had been calling. I was the one it needed. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The coldness had now completely surrounded me, but it wasn't just temperature. It was as though the darkness was trying to consume me, dragging me down into it. The figure at the edge of the well shifted again, its smoky form moving closer. For a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of its features, a twisted, elongated face with hollow, empty eyes. It had a mouth, but it didn't speak with it. The voice, my name, came from somewhere deeper, more ancient than its form could explain. "Ethan," it whispered, and I felt the coldness rush through my veins. My entire body tensed, as if the world had frozen in time. I was standing there, paralyzed with no way to fight back. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted. I staggered forward, feeling as though the house itself were bending under some unseen pressure. I tried to catch my balance, but stumbled forward, my hand reaching out to catch something, anything to stop my fall. But there was nothing. I reached the edge of the well before I even realized it. The black hole in front of me was like a living creature, staring up at me, its edges curling like an open maw, ready to swallow me whole. My heart raced, and the voice that had called to me, came again, this time louder, more insistent. "Ethan, come to me. I will show you what you've been seeking. I will show you the truth." The truth. That word lingered in my mind. What was it? What truth? Was it what I had been seeking all these years? Was it the closure I'd been searching for since the day my parents died? My hands began to shake as the words sunk in. I wanted answers. I needed answers. The grief, the anger, the confusion, I couldn't bear it anymore. If the well had the answers, if this presence could show me the truth of what had happened that night, I would take it. Before I could stop myself, I leaned over the well, peering down into the abyss. I felt it then. A cold, clammy hand shot up from the depths, grabbing my wrist with a force that I couldn't break. The cold radiated from it, filling my body with an ice-cold terror. "No, please," I whispered, but the words were strangled in my throat. The thing in the well pulled harder, dragging me closer, closer to the dark, endless depths. I could hear the whispers now, each word pulling at my consciousness like a needle. It was too much. I couldn't fight it any longer. I couldn't escape. Then, with a final tug, I was falling. Everything went black. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. There was no air, no light, no sensation of anything familiar. The blackness consumed me as I tumbled downward into the depths, falling forever into the void. But then something changed. The darkness around me began to shift, warping like a thick, suffocating fog. I gasped, but it was as if the very air had turned to liquid, suffocating me, drowning me in its cold, oppressive weight. There was no sense of time, no way to tell if I had fallen for a second or for an eternity. My body felt numb, disconnected from the world I had once known. Suddenly, a jolt shot through me. I landed, not on the ground, but something softer, more pliable. My hands reached out instinctively, trying to steady myself. They sank into the surface, as though the ground beneath me had turned to wet, clay-like soil. I pulled my hands back quickly, a chill crawling down my spine. The scent hit me next. It was an overwhelming stench, the kind of smell that clings to you long after you've left the source. It was the smell of wet earth, rotting leaves, and something much worse, something decayed. The air was thick with it, each breath feeling like it could suffocate me if I wasn't careful. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse, alive in a way that didn't feel right. The sensation of movement finally returned to my limbs. I tried to get to my feet, trembling with fear. My mind screamed at me to run, but where could I go in this place? Where was I? It didn't feel like the well anymore. It didn't feel like anything I knew. A strange, distant sound reached my ears. Whispers, but not from a person. These whispers were more ancient, primal, something from beyond the grave. They floated around me, wrapping around me like chains, pulling me deeper into the darkness. And then I heard it again. "Ethan," the voice, the same voice that had called to me from the well, from the shadows was now louder, more urgent. I tried to scream, but my mouth was dry, my body incapable of moving in any direction that made sense. I had fallen too far, too deep into this place to escape. The whispers turned into guttural, snarling voices that grew louder and more threatening with each passing second. Suddenly, the darkness parted, as if something had opened a door, a crack in the oppressive blackness that allowed a single beam of light to cut through. I squinted, struggling to focus on what was in front of me. And then I saw it. The well. It wasn't a well like any I had ever seen. It was far larger, a towering structure of cracked stone and ancient moss, covered in layers of grime and dirt. The walls were slick with moisture, and the smell of decay was stronger here than ever. But what truly shocked me was what I saw at its base. A figure, a woman. She was kneeling by the edge of the well, her back arched in a way that made her seem almost unnatural, like a puppet with its strings cut. Her hair hung around her face, a wild tangle of black strands that covered her eyes, but I could feel that she was staring at me. The voice that had haunted me for days, maybe longer, came from her. "Ethan." I froze in place. Her voice, low and guttural, sent a shiver down my spine, but it wasn't the voice I remembered. There was something wrong with it now, something twisted, like it was coming from the bowels of the earth itself. And I knew, in that instant, that I had found the source of all the whispers. I stepped forward, my legs unsteady as I moved toward her. But I could feel something pulling me toward her, an unseen force that was far stronger than my willpower. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling in fear. Her head snapped upward, revealing the full extent of her face. Her eyes were wide open now, too wide. They bulged unnaturally from their sockets, their whites visible as she stared at me with an unblinking, soulless gaze. Her lips peeled back, revealing sharp, yellowed teeth that did not belong on a human being. "I am the one you sought," she hissed, her voice barely recognizable now, distorted by the eerie echo that surrounded us. "The one who speaks from the depths." I stumbled back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "What do you want from me? Why have you been calling me?" She tilted her head, as if considering the question, and then her lips curled into a sinister grin. "You came for the truth, Ethan, and now you will see it. You will see everything." The light above me dimmed, as if her words had sucked the life from it. The ground beneath me seemed to shift once again, and I could feel something moving below me. Something alive. A deep, reverberating sound rose from beneath, shaking the very foundations of the well. Suddenly, the figure lunged at me with an unnatural speed. Her hand shot out, grabbing me by the wrist, her fingers cold and slimy, like the touch of something that had been buried for centuries. I screamed, trying to wrench myself free, but her grip was unyielding. With a final, terrifying yank, I was pulled toward her. The world spun around me, and I was falling again, faster this time, falling into the endless depths. I could hear her whispering, her voice wrapping around me like chains. "You wanted to know the truth." Her words echoed in my mind, growing louder and louder until they consumed everything. "The truth is this. There is no escaping the well. There is no escaping me." And then there was nothing. I awoke with a start, gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. The well, the voice, it was all gone. But the room around me, It was not the basement anymore. I was back in my childhood home, lying in my old bed. The room was just as I remembered it, with the familiar furniture and faded wallpaper. Everything seemed so normal, as if nothing had happened. But something was wrong. I slowly sat up, looking around. The air in the room felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on me. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed the reflection in the mirror across the room. There, standing behind me, was a figure. It wasn't just any figure. It was the woman from the well, her eyes wide and her mouth twisted in a grotesque grin. Her fingers were reaching out toward me. And then, from the dark corners of the room, I heard the voice again, soft and menacing, but this time it wasn't a whisper. Ethan. The well had followed me home.